Good Wednesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for May the 17th. Today we are reading together in Deuteronomy chapter 11, or excuse me, Deuteronomy chapter 10 and Deuteronomy chapter 11. These texts go decently well together, are two shorter-ish texts, so we're going to go ahead and combine them for today and read them together. Hope everybody's doing well after the chaos that really rolled through last night, yesterday evening. With the crazy storms, it was very strange to see the rain coming down so hard and the wind blowing so strongly when the sun was basically shining. It was very strange, but hopefully everybody is good to go from that. Again, thanks for tuning in with me today to read along in Deuteronomy together. Let me get the text up on the screen for us, and we will read this text together here. Deuteronomy chapter 11 and Deuteronomy chapter 12. Again, we're in the second section of Moses' great speech here in Deuteronomy, and he's just working his way decently systematically, really building a strong case for what he is trying to present to the people concerning their need for covenant loyalty. Here in chapter 10, he's working, actually going back a little bit, going back to chapter 9. Let me see. Let me double check, make sure I'm right here. Going back to chapter 9, talks about their failures of entering into the promised land and just various failures that they had concerning Yahweh, and how Moses was basically ready to, or God was ready to wipe them out, start over Moses, and yet Moses pleads on behalf of the people. So here in chapter 10, we're going to pick up in the time period back in Exodus, whenever Yahweh is going to renew the covenant with the people. And he's saying, remember God's grace, remember his long suffering toward you, and respond to that in the appropriate way, which that remembering and that response is going to draw a lot of echoes from the Shema back in Deuteronomy chapter 6 that we focused on a great deal recently. In fact, there are a number of echoes back to Deuteronomy chapter 6, both here in chapter 10 and chapter 11. So with that said, it kind of gives us a little bit of a heads up about what we're going to see. Let's read together here in Deuteronomy 10, beginning verse number 1 and through all the way through chapter 11. Yahweh said to me at that time, Deuteronomy 10, verse 1, cut the 2 stone tablets like the first ones and come to me on the mountain and make a wooden ark. I will write on the tablets the words that were on the first tablets you broke and are to place them in the ark. So I made an ark of acacia wood, cut 2 stone tablets like the first ones, and climbed the mountain with 2 tablets in my hand. Then on the day of the assembly, Yahweh wrote on the tablets what had been written previously, the 10 commandments. Well, here's an instance where they are called that. The 10 commandments that he had spoken to you on the mountain from fire, Yahweh gave them to me. I went back down the mountain and placed the tablets in the ark I had made, and they have remained there as Yahweh commanded me. The Israelites traveled from Beeroth B'nai Jakah to Mosra. Aaron died and was buried there, and Eleazar his son became priest in his place. They traveled there to Gudgodah, and from Gudgodah to Jotbathah, a land with flowing streams. At that time, Yahweh set apart the tribe of Levi to carry the ark of Yahweh's covenant, to stand before Yahweh to serve him, and to pronounce blessings in his name, as it is today. For this reason, Levi does not have a portion or inheritance like his brothers. Yahweh is his inheritance, and Yahweh, the Lord your God, told him, or as Yahweh your God told him. I stayed on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights, like the first time, and Yahweh listened to me on this occasion. I guess I just completely skipped over the section to highlight. He agreed not to annihilate you. And then Yahweh said to me, get up, continue your journey ahead of the people, so that they may enter and possess the land I swore to give to their ancestors. So they're giving another effort here to go and to try to enter into the land that the previous generation, remember, we're talking about the second generation now at this point, eventually they're going to be going in here. So go on this journey and let us take that back. Let me double check what I'm saying here. I might be getting ahead of myself. The chronology of the retellings has gotten me confused as I've been going through here, trying to keep everything straight in a row. Let's see. Yeah, I think that might be right, actually. I think we might be on there. I believe so, actually. I think that's correct. I think at this point we're on to the second generation, although it could be wrong. I reserve the right to correct myself later on after I think about this a little bit more. Verse number 12. And now, Israel, what does Yahweh your God ask of you except to fear Yahweh your God by walking all his ways, to love him and to worship Yahweh your God with all your heart, with all your soul? Keep Yahweh's commands and statutes I'm giving you today for your good. The heavens, indeed, the highest heavens, belong to Yahweh your God, as does the earth and everything in it. Yet Yahweh had his heart set on your ancestors and loved them. He chose their descendants after them. He chose you out of all the peoples as it is today. Therefore, circumcise your hearts and don't be stiff-necked any longer. For Yahweh your God is the God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, mighty, and awe-inspiring God, showing no partiality and taking no bribe. He executes justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the resident alien, giving him food and clothing. You are also to love the resident alien, since you were resident aliens in the land of Egypt. You are to fear Yahweh your God and worship him, remain faithful to him, and take oaths in his name. He is your praise, and he is your God, who has done for you these great and awe-inspiring works your eyes have seen. Your ancestors went down to Egypt, 70 people in all, and now Yahweh your God has made you numerous, like the stars of the sky. Therefore, chapter 11 of Deuteronomy, love Yahweh your God and always keep his mandate and his statutes, ordinances, and commands. Understand today that it is not your children who experienced or saw the discipline of Yahweh your God, his greatness, strong hand, and outstretched arm, his signs and the works he did in Egypt to Pharaoh, king of Egypt, and all his land, what he did to Egypt's army, its horses and chariots, when he made the water of the Red Sea flow over them as they pursued you, and he destroyed them completely, what he did to you in the wilderness until you reached this place, and what he did to Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, the Reubenites, when in the middle of the whole Israelite camp, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them, their households, their tents, and every living thing with them. Your own eyes have seen every great work Yahweh has done. Keep every command I'm giving you today, so that you may have the strength to cross into and possess the land you are to inherit, and so that you may live long in the land Yahweh swore to your ancestors to give them and their descendants, a land flowing with milk and honey. For the land you are entering to possess is not like the land of Egypt, from which you have come, where you sowed your seed and irrigated it by hand, as in a vegetable garden. But the land you are entering to possess is a land of mountains and valleys, watered by rain from the land. It is a land that Yahweh your God cares for. He is always watching over it, from the beginning to the end of the year. If you carefully obey my commands I am giving you today to love Yahweh your God and worship him with all your heart and with all your soul, I will provide rain for your land in the proper time, the autumn and spring rains, and you will harvest your grain, new wine, and fresh oil. I will provide grass in your fields for your livestock. You will eat and be satisfied. Be careful that you are not enticed to turn aside, serve, and bow in worship to other gods. Then Yahweh's anger will burn against you. He will shut the sky, and there will be no rain. The land will not yield its produce, and you will perish quickly from the good land Yahweh is giving you. Imprint these words of mine on your hearts and minds, bind them as a sign on your hands, and let them be a symbol on your foreheads. Teach them to your children, talking about them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up. Write them on the doorpost of your house and on your city gates, so that as long as the heavens are above, so as long as the heavens are above the earth, your days and those of your children may be many in the land Yahweh swore to give to your ancestors. For if you carefully observe every one of these commands I'm giving you to follow, to love Yahweh your God, walk in all his ways and remain faithful to him, Yahweh will drive out all these nations before you, and you will drive out nations greater and stronger than you. Every place the sole of your foot treads will be yours. Your territory will extend from the wilderness of Lebanon and from the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea. No one will be able to stand against you. Yahweh your God will put fear and dread in you in all the land where you set foot, as he has promised you. Look, today I set before you a blessing and a curse. There will be a blessing if you obey the commands of Yahweh your God I'm giving you today, and a curse if you do not obey the commands of Yahweh your God and turn aside from the path I commanded you today by following other gods you have not known. When Yahweh your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, you are to proclaim a blessing at Mount Gerizim and a curse at Mount Ebal. Aren't these mountains across the Jordan, beyond the western road in the land of the Canaanites who live in the Arabah, opposite Gilgal, near the oaks of Moreh? For you are about to cross the Jordan to enter and take possession of the land Yahweh your God is giving you. When you possess it and settle it, be careful to follow all the statutes and ordinances I set before you today. And that is Numbers chapter 10, Deuteronomy chapter 10 and Deuteronomy chapter 11. Deuteronomy chapter 10, Deuteronomy chapter 11. All right, he is reestablishing this covenant. He's reminding them that he is reestablishing the covenant with the people. And he is using this to remind them of God's grace and of his mercy and of their need to be faithful in what they are doing. Again, verse 12. Verse 12, after the historical portion of 1 through 11, verse 12 picks up and talks and does do a restating and an echoing of what we see in chapter 6 and verses 4 through 9, the Shema, but it also is something that is alluded to in Micah chapter 6 and verse number 8. That is the requirement, is what God expects of his covenant people. Very simply, to fear Yahweh your God. What is fear? As I heard another preacher say, to fear God is to simply fear God. It's not simply respect. It's not just that. If it was simply respect, he would have said respect. It's also not to be terrified of Yahweh, trembling, just waiting for him to strike you. That's not the idea either. There's something in between. There's something between just plain respect and abject terror. It is a realization of who God is. And that's the idea here. To fear him, knowing what he's capable of, but also knowing that there is a loving relationship that's established there. So how is that seen? How is that manifested? Well, it's manifested by walking in all his ways and to love him and to worship him with all of your heart and soul. So again, it's not just rote legalistic obedience. It's also a conviction and a passion for Yahweh, that we do these things. We follow his ways and we worship him with everything that we are, because of our love for him. That's what he says is the expectation of God's people who are in covenant with him. Now, it's interesting that he goes back and says, he chose your fathers because he loved them, and he chose their descendants after them because, again, he loved the family. He says in verse 16, therefore circumcise your hearts and don't be stiff-necked any longer, which is interesting because previously we read how they were a stiff-necked people. Going back a couple of chapters, we see that that's who the people were, and for that they were rebuked, and for that they were punished. Now, what is additionally interesting and ironic is the fact that we're going to come to find out in Joshua chapter 5 and verses 4 through 7, that the current generation is actually not physically circumcised. So that's something they're going to have to do here in a little while. So just a little bit ironic in that sense. But then to speak of Yahweh, he is the God of gods. He is the Lord of lords, the great, mighty, awe-inspiring God, showing no partiality, taking no bribe. He executes justice for the helpless, the fatherless, the widow, the resident alien. He cares for those the world neglects, which shows that he does not care just for the rich and the powerful. No, he cares even for the lowly and the needy, and again, the helpless. And you are to be like him in that way, he says. You also are to love the resident alien, as, hey, don't forget, you also were a resident alien back in Egypt. Your fathers went down to Egypt, 70 people in all, and now Yahweh your God has made you numerous like the stars of the sky, referencing what we've seen previously in Genesis, and also go back to chapter 7 and verse number 7. So knowing this, be motivated, or to be motivated to do these things, to be motivated to live in this just and holy and righteous way, be motivated by the past. That's what we see in chapter 11, where we learn some lessons of God, lessons from their past, lessons concerning the land as well. Love Yahweh your God and always keep his mandate and his statutes, ordinances, and commands. Understand that today it is not your children who experienced or saw the discipline of Yahweh your God. They didn't see that. You did. You might have been very young when this happened, or maybe not even around yet, but the majority of you, there's enough here that have seen this. So you can learn from experience. You can learn from what happened in Egypt with the signs and the wonders through the plagues. You have you either seen maybe with your young eyes, or you've heard firsthand from those about the parting of the Red Sea. You also know about the punishment, the major rebellion that took place by Dathan and Abiram. That whole unfortunate circumstance where they try to usurp the authority of Moses and Aaron. You've seen that. You have seen every great work Yahweh has done. So the implication here is then to teach your children. They didn't see it, but you did. So make sure that you are teaching them. Make sure you're teaching them. Make sure that you learn from the principles that are going to govern your stay in the land, this land flowing with milk and honey. You're going to enter it, and it's going to be different than Egypt. You know, in Egypt, you had to work all these man-made irrigation systems. That way you could take advantage of the water that was there, because the vast majority of people lived around the Nile. So you had that incredible resource, and all you had to do is get the water to where you need it to be. But that's not how this land is. The land you're entering is a land of mountains and valleys that's watered by rain in the sky. And who just so happens to control the rain in the sky? That's Yahweh. It is a land that Yahweh, your God, cares for. He is always watching over it from the beginning of the year, or from the beginning to the end of the year. So God here, he's the one that cares for this land. He provides for this land, not the Nile. So if you carefully obey my commands I'm giving you today, to love Yahweh your God and to worship him with all your heart, with all your soul, then guess what he's going to do? He will provide the rain. He will provide the rain for the land at the proper time. When's the proper time? Well, the most proper times was the autumn and the spring rain, because these follow drought times of drought within the land. That God will give that to you. He will allow you to reap produce of your harvest. But be careful that you're not enticed to turn aside and serve and bow and worship to other gods who others claim to be in control of these things. No, that's not them. It is Yahweh and Yahweh alone. Because then Yahweh's anger will burn against you. He will shut the sky. He will shut the sky. There will be no rain. The land will not yield its produce, and you will perish quickly from the good land Yahweh is giving you. So you want to avoid that? If you want to avoid that, then imprint these hearts of mine on your heart and mind. Bind them, as a sign on your hands, and let them be as a symbol on your foreheads. Teach them to your children. Talk about them when you sit in your house, when you walk along the road, when you lie down, and when you get up. Write them on the doorpost over your house and on your city gates. Again, re-emphasizing the teachings of the Shema from chapter 6. Again, if you carefully observe these things, to love Yahweh your God, walk in his ways, remain faithful to him, then also what's going to happen is you're going to drive out these nations that are before you. You will drive out nations greater and stronger than you. Every place that you walk will be yours. From the wilderness of Lebanon to the Euphrates River to the Mediterranean Sea, no one will be able to stand against you. Why? Because Yahweh your God will put fear and dread of you in all the land where you set foot, as he has promised. So look today. Here's the kind of the wrapping up of the matter, the conclusion of the matter. I set before you a blessing and a curse. Here's your options. You will receive the blessing if you obey the commands of Yahweh your God I'm giving you today. But there will be a curse if you do not obey the commands of Yahweh your God, and you turn aside from the path I command you today by following other gods you have not known. So it's simple as that. Make the choice. What I want you to do, when, verse 29, when Yahweh your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess, I want you to proclaim the blessing at Mount Gerizim, and then I want you to pronounce the curse at Mount Ebal. Where are these places? They are across the Jordan in the land. It also says that they're near the Oaks of Moreh. It's interesting that's said, because that is a patriarchal landmark. Abraham is spoken about of being around this place, and some of the other patriarchs as well. So you are now in the land that was promised to them. This is another re-emphasis of the promise that I'm going to get you there. And then you need to affirm the reality of the blessings and the curse. Blessings at Mount Gerizim, curse at Mount Ebal. There's also some connections here with Jesus, some geography in which he was in. So when you possess it and settle in it. Again, for emphasis one more time, be careful to follow the statutes, ordinances I set before you today. So a lot of this, what we've seen here in this chapter, a lot of this is rehashed from previously, from previous sections. Again, one of the ways you really stress things is by emphasis and repetition, maybe saying the same thing in a slightly different way to really drive home the point, to make sure that people are understanding what is being said. And one of the things here I'll just mention is the reality of divine will and human responsibility. This is God's will, but the people also had the responsibility to make sure they were respecting God's will and honoring God's will by their actions. One more thing I'll share with you today, just that's kind of cool. Actually, not kind of cool. It's really cool, if we're being honest here. An archaeological find that was a big deal last year in 2022. They actually found what is believed to be what's known as a curse tablet from Mount Ebal. I will link this website. I will link this webpage in the comment section. So I'm just going to leave this up here real fast for you to quickly look at, and then you can go over and read this more precisely if you would like later on. So this is believed to be a tablet that was first written at least in 1200 BC, if not a little bit before that. It is written in a very, very old Hebraic alphabet that might make it even older, but it is a curse tablet around Mount Ebal, which what we read here is the curses were to be pronounced in Mount Ebal. We have here what is said: cursed, 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 cursed by God, and then we have the name of God in what they believe to be an early version of Yahweh's name, just YHW instead of YHWH. You will die cursed, cursed. You will surely die cursed by Yahweh, cursed, cursed, cursed. Again, I will link this on the in the comments below, so you can take a look at that if you would like a bit further. But that's just a really cool find that, if legitimate, seems to give some credence to what we see here in the scriptures, and gives one of the oldest documentations of Hebraic writing that has been found to date. Just a pretty cool thing that happened just recently, within the past year and a half or so. I appreciate you tuning into this reading today, and I hope you have a great rest of your Wednesday. We're going to be gathering together tonight at 7 p.m. for our Bible studies. Hope you can tune in then as well. And if you have any questions, please link them in the comments section below. Comments and questions are certainly appreciated and encouraged. We'll be reading together tomorrow from Deuteronomy chapter 12. Hope you can tune in then. Take care, and God bless.